There, I think now.
Success?
Yeah, I think now we're live.
Okay.
So I'm just going to check over on Facebook on my other alternate
Yep.
device just to
Yep.
see,
Yep.
just to make sure, doing things a little different. It's fine. Anybody who's like coming in here, I think that I can see comments too. Can you see comments?
I can. I
Oh,
can even
sweet. I
write
think,
a comment. I love how forgiving the world is.
I know. Oh, I think,
We're
yep,
trying.
there it is. Yep, it's
Hey.
there. All right, amazing. Here we go. Who knows? Who knows? I'm always just, it'll happen. It's fine. So Liz Jackson Hearns, it is a real pleasure to have you here on my live office hours today. Again, one thing I'm always like, oh, what's another? Yeah, don't know. Okay, don't know if I'm able to even see whether people are joining. I don't know. I have no idea because it's a different format again. Anywho, what a pleasure. I am going to do a little, so my name is Dr. Shannon Coates, and my pronouns are she and they. And as I was thinking about that, I would like you to do a little introduction as well. But as I was thinking about having you on today and talking to you, I was thinking about the fact that the first time that I had heard someone use those pronouns, she, they, or she, her, they, them, rather than just they or she or just the singular one, was from you. So that was the first time that I heard that. So anyway, we can get into that a little bit as well, but please do introduce yourself. Tell me where you're coming from.
Great. My name is Liz Jackson Hearns. My pronouns are she, her, and they, them. I'm the co-founder and owner of the Voice Lab, Inc. in Chicago and all over the world, where we specialize in voice and music education through a gender-affirming lens. I am the author of One Weird Trick, A User's Guide to Transgender Voice, and co-author of the Singing Teacher's Guide to Transgender Voices.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a good spiel. That is a very good spiel. And so let me go back to the first time when I took One Weird Trick, the course that you offer, which is coming up as well, and which we're going to put links into the comments as well. I'm going to ask you to talk about it at the end as well.
Yes.
But so I first did that. I'm trying to think, was it summer 2020?
It was 2020 because it was, I think it was the same weekend as Matt's, actually. So I was like, I wonder if anyone's going to do this.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. The iteration of the course that I did was over a period of weeks.
Yes.
So yeah, so that was anyway, so that was over a period of weeks, and I think it's a slightly different format now, but so we'll talk about that in a minute too. But so that was, and when I did that work with you, I had already been thinking about gendered voice. I'd already been thinking about the language that we're using to describe voice. I'd already been thinking about that, and one of the things that had got me thinking about that, and probably a couple of years back, was thinking about, I had one just fabulous singer in one of my undergraduate voice ped classes who said to me, when I was talking about child voice, who said to me, okay, wait though, if the anatomy and physiology of the children is the same until puberty, like until the hormones click in, why do we have boy sopranos? What's happening there, right? And it was the first time that I had really thought about it. And so this is going back a couple of years. And then I was like, yeah, why? Okay, that's a terrific question. Thank you for asking. And then, so that got me thinking. And so that sort of started me, that question and thinking about it started me on this kind of journey into like gendered voice and understanding gender and in the voice and the language that we use to describe the voice, and the language we use to describe anatomy and physiology in the voice as well. So that had already been kind of percolating in the background. And then when I took your course, it really kind of came to the forefront. And so that was the first time that I heard and understood what, talking about what we're going to talk about specifically today, but like testosterone-influenced voice, estrogen-influenced voice. And that was the first time, from that time on, that's when I was very intentional about starting to use that language, especially when I was working when I'm working with voice teachers, which is primarily what I do, and then when I'm teaching classes. So what I would love to start with, after that little wander around, what I would love to start with, if you don't mind, is where does this language come from? Or perhaps we should start with the importance of the language. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to start?
I think starting with the importance of the language is
Sure.
great. So I think that, with all of these updates in language, we are attempting to get closer and closer to what it is we're actually trying to say. And to, I think, also recognize and interrupt sort of inherent cisnormativity and cissexism in the way we talk about voices. So in choosing language like a voice influenced by testosterone-based puberty, it's a lot of words, but it's very accurate. And it makes no assumptions about the social history or what that person's assigned gender and or sex may have been, what their experienced or expressed gender is or was or will be. So I think the importance of the language is just getting more and more accurate to what we're trying to say. So to that end, I've actually stopped, for the most part, using terms like AMAB and AFAB. And AMAB stands for assigned male at birth, AFAB stands for assigned female at birth, because even those are enormously presumptive.
Yes.
I have no idea.
Exactly.
Sounds like it is in a body of a person who went through testosterone-based puberty, I think. But I don't, there's no way for me to know. That's really deeply personal information.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yes, and this is also part of why when you first started to speak this way, or when I first started to sort of put all of these together in the course, it appealed so much to me in terms of the accuracy of the description, right? That is always my, I'm always trying to like find the most accurate and decisive way to describe, because like I said, I'm working with voice teachers all the time. So I want to just make sure this is as accurate and as decisive as possible, or incisive. I'm not sure if I'm using the words I want to use there, but anyway, I'm trying to be accurate with my language, and yet,
ha ha, how meta.
How I think. So that is what really appeals to me about using this language. So now, and also I think it maybe should be said as well that AMAB and AFAB is no longer, correct me if I'm wrong here, my understanding is that is no longer useful or prominent in the transgender community either. Yeah.
And so like that's the other, I think, important piece of this is like taking stock of who is coming up with the language.
Yes.
So even so, like AMAB and AFAB, like I've never heard a trans person call themselves an AMAB or an AFAB person, like, because who cares? So this question of like, where did I learn this? Like, I learned a lot of this language stuff from Kelly George, who is a therapist in Chicago, who is one of the guest speakers at our upcoming conference as well. And Kelly taught me a lot about this idea of like just getting more accurate and like trying to describe experiences and ways of thinking about voice and ways of thinking about identity, where originally the language to describe that experience had come from people who did not share that experience.
Right.
So even the terms transgender and cisgender are cisnormative in themselves, right? So when we're talking about like where it came from, like I think that's important to make note that the language, more and more, I think it's important for language to come from the people whose lived experiences it's describing.
Yeah. So then this this language, so then this language, your first experience with this language was with folks who are like, so yeah, so where did this language come from? This is where, specifically, where is it coming from? Like, I know where I heard it first from you and in your work, and so then you heard it first and have had discussions around this language where?
With Kelly. So Kelly is a trans non-binary therapist. So when we first met, so if you have a copy of the Singing Teacher's Guide to Transgender Voices, there is a whole chapter that's an interview with Kelly, and Kelly talks about things like language and talks about some of these preconceived notions around what cultural responsiveness looks like in a gender-affirming environment, and like how to kind of call yourself into your own biases, and how to start to pay attention to the things that you might walk into that conversation thinking, and then release some of those thoughts for a new framework. So a lot of what I know about language originated with these really deep conversations with Kelly.
Okay, beautiful. Because I wanted to just make sure that it's made explicit, that this is language that's coming out of the community of people who are using it, right? Like these are the people that are using it. So this is language that part of the reason we wanted to have this conversation and kind of have this out here as a resource as well is that when the language is introduced without context, and when it's kind of thrown out there and sort of taken on without context, I mean, I feel like folks are doing that with really great intentions. I don't, we all know where great intentions gets us sometimes, but I feel like, folks are doing, bringing in the language in order to, out of a good place. But when that language is introduced without context, we then often there's this very negative response, right? So the negative response becomes, well, testosterone is a male hormone, so why am I like, or those hormones are gendered, so like I may as well just say male, right? Or I may as well just say female. So why are we using this language? Or some of the other comments are, well, like, that's really clunky language. How am I going to use that in choirs? Like, what am I going to say in choir? Or, or is this even really what the transgender community wants? Like, who's telling us that this is what we have to do, right? Like, why should I even do this? I don't even think, transgender people want this kind of thing. So there's a lot of kind of feedback, especially when there isn't context. So,
well, there's a lot wrapped up in there.
I know. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you specifically, but why we wanted to have these conversations.
Yeah.
So do you mind going through kind of point by point?
I will try. Yeah. So, okay. There's a lot wrapped in there.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the central tenet of this is empathy. So I believe very firmly that in order to do authentic gender affirming voice work, it has to begin internally. And so a huge part of our educational process within the Voice Lab and with these teacher trainings that we do is deeply interactive. Like, what are your pronouns? Tell me about your gender identity today. Tell me about how you express your voice or how you express your gender with your voice. How does the world interact with you and perceive you based on the way you express your gender with your voice? Does it feel congruent? Maybe today, maybe not. So that when we have conversations about getting clearer with the language, it's not being prescribed in any direction at all. It's coming internally, right? So if I think some of those reactions are reactions to change. I think some of it is like, oh, this changes my whole framework for how I see humanity, and that's a really crucial moment to have. You have to have that moment where you realize that something you thought was an immutable truth is not, and that's crucial. That's a really productive, painful but productive moment, and a huge part of the process. And I remember that moment in my own journey too. And I remember like Doss, who wrote the foreword to the book, like was my first trans client and like literally sat me down in a coffee shop and was like, what do you think you know about gender? And I was like, I don't know. So like that's a really important moment. And like the benefit of like social media is that you get to have it with other people, and so like if you can lean on each other to like, wow, this is really making me uncomfortable because I thought I knew a thing and I really don't, and I based my whole pedagogical framework around this very binary assumption of what gender is. This is hard, like that's okay, it's okay, like that's really good. So I think the first piece is this self-reflective piece, right? And like this idea of empathy. And I think it's also really important for us to experience expressing gender in a different way with voice in order to kind of gain more of this deep level of empathy. And like, oh, just because my voice was influenced by estrogen-based puberty does not mean that it is limited, that only certain parts of it are valid. I think that is also this big question that comes in when we start to reframe the language, is like we have to acknowledge that like parts of us were invalidated. We have all been gender policed, and parts of our voices were invalidated based on this system that served a few people, but no longer serves us as a community of vocalists, right? Then I think there's this piece of like, what do trans people want? And I think there is an imperative to like look at community and individuals kind of at the same time. So like, even though I got to have these great conversations with Doss and Kelly just as examples, like these are individual people who have individual experiences, individual lenses of what gender is and how they live it. And like the trans community is not a thing. Like the trans community is a way to describe many, many, many communities made up of many, many, many individual people. And so when you're talking about how to generalize these terms, like you can't generalize the terms. Gender affirmation looks different for each individual person. And that is our charge. If we are intending to become gender affirming voice practitioners, like that is the charge, is to be an individualistic teacher, which I think, thanks to you, is a lot of where this industry is headed, which is awesome and really exciting.
A little bit. Only a little bit to me.
This is so great. This is so great. I think we're moving the things, which is cool.
Yeah. And creating a more well, again, creating more accuracy. I mean, this is more accurate. Like, what do you say to the folks who say that testosterone is a male hormone, and so I may as well just say male voice, versus, you know, estrogen is a female hormone, and so I may as well just say female voice? What is the,
well,
what's the response there?
I think that sounds like there's some conflation between assigned sex and gender, which are not the same thing. So assigned sex is something that a doctor decides for a person who is born based on primary and secondary sex characteristics, which we have historically categorized in two large buckets. But even that is not inclusive. So that, like, uncouple those things first, and then also, you know, I think there are so many really wonderful female singers who underwent testosterone-based puberty, and their hormones, because this was a female person probably her whole life, like they were female hormones because it's a female person. So like, I don't think biology inherently has a gender. This, you know, gender is a thing that we made up. And like, from an evolutionary standpoint, it's helpful to have binaries because we need to know what is water and what is not water, even though it's blue.
Yeah.
Right. So from an evolutionary standpoint, great. But I think we can move into more nuance than that at this stage, and can allow ourselves to view things relating to bodies and biology in a much more broad way, and maybe in a more nuanced way, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, part of the journey for me has been, you know, being very close to and parenting a child who has thought deeply, deeply about gender and gender binaries and understanding who they are. So that has been a really big part of the journey for me as well, is just walking through this journey with her, or them. She doesn't mind which way you go with that, because, and again, part of what we have talked about is that testosterone is associated with maleness because we as a society have decided these are the things that are male. And so the testosterone gives you big muscles, gives you a larger larynx, gives you, gives you a more jaw, gives you like bigger blah, 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 gives you all of these things. And so the testosterone, and we associate all those things with male on the binary, right? So we associate big jaw with male on the binary. We associate being tall, big muscles, blah, blah, blah. We associate all those things on the binary of male, right? And so and because of that, then we've given testosterone the male hormone, and then the opposite with estrogen. I mean, it's more complicated than that, of course, but the opposite with non-testosterone or estrogen or whatever. So we've kind of put those on those binaries. So when, like you're saying, when we sort of uncouple that from, and we start to say, oh, look, like, this, just because testosterone is there we've just decided, we just made a decision that that's male. That's all we did. So it doesn't have to actually be that, right? Like that doesn't have to actually be that. So then we can kind of start to say, look, testosterone does these things to the body, right? But that's what it does. It doesn't make you male. It just does these things to a body, right? So then we can say this is without bringing in gender, we can start to say this is a testosterone-influenced larynx, for example, or this is a testosterone-influenced body or instrument. We can say that without having the implication that it's male, because the male part is what society has decided goes along with testosterone. Hopefully that is making sense and supporting what you were already saying. And then the same thing on the other side of the binary, right? So this binary is not in quotation marks, on the other side of the binary. That we're trying to move away from, but like it is a big
gender, gender is fake and real at the same time.
Exactly. I don't know. So on the other side of the binary, right, where we say like, okay, so but again, in going through these things and talking through these things again with my kid and with therapists and all that, and doing these really kind of deep thoughts about this, I mean, we start to see that binary is really it's really not there. I mean, it is, but it's really, it's a construct, right? I have a big old square jaw. Like I have a big old square jaw. I am a tall person. I have a big, huge head. Like these are all things that are like not necessarily female, right? And yet here I am certainly expressing my gender in a traditional female sense, but like, it doesn't have to be, right? So that's where we can kind of start to take apart, hopefully that supports what you were saying, where we can kind of start to separate the gender from the hormone expression and start to say, this is what these things do to a body, and this is then how they affect the singing voice. And then that doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about a gender in the singing voice. Whew.
Hard agree.
There's a lot of stuff in there too. And a lot of sort of again, a lot of kind of context that's required, I think, right? There's a lot of context that's required, and there's a lot of sort of thinking through all of these concepts, and thinking through, how we consider gender, and as you were saying, so and kind of coming back to the they, them, she, her, or she, her, they, them. I'm saying, like, I first saw that you were using she, her, they, them. That was the first time I had an exposure to that in that usage. And then as I said, my kid, who's had lots of thinking through all of these things as well, as she's sort of coming into her own, she also uses she, her, they, them as her pronouns. And her explanation for that is that she says, I don't believe in the gender binary. Like, I don't believe that she calls herself a non-binary femme. So that is her, yeah. So that's her description, because she's like, I don't believe in the gender binary. I don't believe that I can wear a dress or I can not wear a dress. Anybody can wear a dress or not wear a dress. That doesn't make you male or female. I can wear my hair however I want. Doesn't make me male or female. Blah blah blah. Like all of the things. And at the same time, I acknowledge that in this body that I've got a womb. I'm getting, I have a menstrual cycle. I also have, I've got boobs. I've got hips. I've got these things that are happening, right? Like in my body, and I acknowledge that those things are there, and I'm fine with them. They don't make me uncomfortable, and I acknowledge that they're there, and I embrace them. That is part of who I am. And that doesn't make me a woman, just makes me a person with a womb, right? Like it makes me a person with a womb. So that's how, again, I kind of wanted to like throw that in there as well in terms of the pronouns, because that also then is an indication, her way of indicating I'm not on board with the gender binary here, and at the same time I acknowledge that this is what my body is. Do you have any comments on that? Is that kind of where you're coming from as well?
I just am constantly impressed with her, like all the time. What an amazing person. She must have a really good mom. I think that is pretty close to my own experience with the combo pronouns. Every person is different for sure, and I think everybody chooses to use pronouns in the way that they choose, for their own individual purposes. But I think that really resonates with me. This idea of like, I don't really believe in it, but I think part of my I'm gonna hold on before I spill that thought out of my face. Do I mean it? I'm cool with either, I think is what it means. So like if we've not met and you use she, her with me, like that's totally fine. A lot of my friends use they, them, which is also totally cool and validating. And I think the not being, I think, yes, resonates a lot with me. Like this is my non-commitment. This is how I am expressing my non-commitment to the gender binary in my own way. Yeah, I think that really resonates with me. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I love that. Is there anything else that you feel like needs to be said in terms of anything else that you feel needs to be said in terms of making this, just what we're doing here today, making this kind of a resource for folks who come up against language for the first time perhaps, or they just hear it coming out of the blue kind of thing, and being able to give context to it? Is there anything else you want to kind of put in there that will help to make sure that the full context of the language is there?
I really think I'm just seeing so many voice teachers kind of on this journey toward being truly student-centric. And I think a huge piece of that is like recognizing and releasing all of the narratives that have come with us, especially those of us who went through a classical education, in terms of like teacher knows best.
Right.
So I think sometimes what gets set off when this language is new, this like deep insecurity of like, oh, I'm supposed to be the teacher, I'm supposed to know all the things. Suddenly I don't know a thing in like a very new way. And so I think a huge piece of this is like recognizing when you are falling back into the idea of teacher knows best, like even if you don't think that necessarily about yourself, like if that insecurity is getting triggered, like that's understandable because that's the narrative that you've been fed for so long. What a beautiful opportunity to like say hello to it and like, thanks for sharing, I'm good. What a great opportunity to like really get real deep with why you teach and who you teach and how to really deeply meet them where they are. I just think it's such a great opportunity. It's uncomfortable. It's a good opportunity.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, beautifully put. Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, and I also, I think I would add to that as well that that when it comes up, the thought that like I need to know what the gender is or else I can't teach them well, right? Like I don't know. I mean, I do a class on teaching the testosterone-influenced voice, and I used to call it teaching the male voice, and that and in some ways male gets the idea across because then everybody knows what we're talking about. So I'm transitioning over that language. But
well, I would, you know what? I'm going to push back on you about that. Not everyone knows what you're talking about. Everyone who buys into the cisgender binary knows what you're talking about.
True story. True story.
Yeah.
Yep. True.
Sorry. Keep going. Sorry.
So I teach that class, and I have that class very specifically as a class because folks ask all the time, I don't know how to teach male students, right? Like I need more information on how to teach male students, and I need to know how to do that. And so when that starts to come up as an insecurity, right? I don't know how to teach a male student, and I want to do my best by this person, by this student. Start to consider that what we're looking at and what we're looking at in terms of how the voice works is dependent on where we are in the pitch range. It's not dependent on whether we're talking about male or female, and it's dependent on how large the vocal tract is and how big those vocal folds are versus how small the vocal tract is. And so what is available to a specifically sized vocal tract in a specific pitch range, right? What are the actual options in terms of what I can actually do in this pitch range according to what's in what my physical makeup is. So I would just say when and if that kind of like, I need to know gender so that I can teach them well, start to consider what you actually need to know is how big is the larynx? Or what's available to this specific larynx in that pitch range, right? Start to understand where are the pitch range things? Where are the things where we actually are going to find some transitions happening in terms of what's available, in terms of, you know, how we shape the vocal tract, what's available in terms of thick or thin vocal folds, all of those kinds of registration things. Figure out what's happening in the pitch range and what's available to that larynx in the pitch range, rather than, so starting to turn that from like, I actually don't know how to work with, say, let's say E4, so the E above middle C, let's say E4 and below. I actually don't know how to work with larynxes from E4 and below. I don't know what the options are, right?
Yeah.
Rather than I don't know how to work with a male voice, right? So start to kind of, when that language kind of gets in you and you start to feel the need to have that specific kind of work, it's actually more about what's available. It's actually more about sound, the science of sound. It's actually a lot more about science than it is about anything else, right? So again, that's back to the accuracy thing that we were kind of talking, where we kind of started as well. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's a great reframe.
Yeah, have that kind of reframe. Acknowledge, like you're saying, right? Acknowledge, okay, this is an opportunity for me to kind of rethink.
Yeah.
So do you have one last question. Do you have any thoughts? Like I work almost exclusively with voice teachers, right? And I'm not working with choirs, and I'm not a musical director. I'm not working with I'm not working with big chunks of singers at a time, right? I'm working with voice teachers. So I almost always have the ability to give context, right? And I'm always trying to give context. So I almost always have that ability to kind of say, here's why we're using this language, here's what's behind it, blah, blah, blah. I almost always have that ability. Do you have advice or thoughts about, if I were, say, a choral director or a music director or someone who's working with, folks in a school or something along those lines, or just working in a voice studio regularly, about starting to reframe language so that we're not saying, okay, all the boys on this side of the room and all the girls on this side of the room, or all the high singers here. Maybe high singers is a way to put it. I don't know. You know, all the high singers here and all the low singers here. Like, do you have advice about how to kind of use this language in that kind of situation as well?
Mm-hmm. Couple of thoughts. That's not, I'm not there every day either. So one, I think, is like breaking down voice parts instead of gender for sure. Like, you know, sopranos and altos and tenors and basses, or high voices and low voices is great. I love seeing, I mean, choirs who do like part 1, 2, 3, 4, which is great. I don't think that voice parts are inherently gendered. I think they are culturally gendered. So it, you know, depends on what the feeling of the group and the director is in regard to what to call different voice types. What I know about people is that courage breeds respect. And so I am always all for transparency and courage. If you're returning, welcome back to the new season. I did some work and I learned some things, and we're going to try something together. And here's where this is coming from, and this is why we're doing it together. It's okay if it's uncomfortable. Let's talk about it and make sure that we're all in agreement about why this is happening. I think is always a good way to go. Being prescriptive, I think, especially in a group setting, is not always productive. I think. So I'm all for transparency and being courageous in the conversation, and really, you know, being making it a group agreement that we're all kind of going to enter into this new language realm together.
Yeah, love it.
Not easy.
No, not easy. Not easy. And but
neither is directing a choir. I mean, like, you have to be courageous to do that at all, I think. And like, you like honor your own courage that you already do it, right? And like lean into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Right. Oh my goodness. No. Yeah. Directing choirs. Oh, that's not the thing for me. That's for darn sure.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh, so all kudos out there to all of the music directors and all of the folks who do that and who love it somehow. That's amazing. I do not know how that works. And I love being in front of groups of people. It is not about that. It is about like, nope. Anywho, beautiful. Liz, any last words before we kind of, oh yes, please tell me about what's coming up.
Yes.
The Voice Lab.
So at the Voice Lab on October 15th through the 17th, we're hosting a 3-day teacher training intensive party. It's going to be great. Joined by other amazing voice practitioners. Ruchi Capilla will be joining us. Kelly George, therapist, will be joining us. Ariel Zatina, co-facilitator, will be there. She's phenomenal. And this is great for voice teachers, for speech pathologists. If you know this is a realm of education where you want to get more, definitely join us. It will all be recorded. We have people joining us from Australia. We have people joining us from Chicago, all over the world. So even if being there live is not accessible to you, you'll have opportunities to watch it later. You can register at thevoicelabinc.com. Go to the speech page, and there's a teacher training section where you can register. And I'm just going to grab the link real quick.
Yeah, perfect. Throw it in the comments. And we'll also edit the description too, so that it says that it's you.
Awesome. Yeah, very excited. We've been doing this training for a few years, and it gets better and better and clearer every time we do it. And this like conversation about language gets more and more deep and lively, and it's great every time we do it. It's really, I think it's, for everyone involved, tends to be a pretty transformational experience, which is, as you know, is kind of my personal mission in the world.
Transformational teaching. Yeah, I mean, and also maybe coming back to one of the very first things that we were talking about too, where child voice, we can start to differentiate between male and female speakers in the child voice by like 6 or 7 years old, even though the instrument, the anatomy and physiology, is exactly the same. Like,
Yep.
So the anatomy and physiology exactly the same. We can start to, and that is purely through what we learn as being a female in the world or being a male in the world. That is purely through what we've learned. We change our speech patterns. So that was one of the things that was really also quite revolutionary for me, is to get that information clear in my head about gender, our recognition of our taking of gender from what we hear in the voice is not about pitch range.
Right.
It's essentially not about, I mean, in some cases maybe, but in many, many cases, it's not about pitch range. It's about how we actually use the voice, which is through socialization and like what we do. I mean, that was completely so interesting to me, because I have a relatively low voice, but like, you know, no one mistakes, or not mistake. No one, very few people don't think that I am female from my voice, right? Like very few. So, and it's not about pitch, which was very, very interesting. So anyway, if this is interesting to you, then, and this is what I want to get more clear about, that is, I can't recommend it highly enough. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Liz.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. What a wonderful discussion. Super appreciate you opening this space for us to talk about it. It's really important.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And I'm glad this is a resource here now too. I might even make a transcript of it. We'll see.
Oh, cute. Yeah, fun. Hopefully say some smart things.
We'll see. Thank you so much, Liz. Take good care. I will see you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Oops. If only I could end.